Hello everyone, my name is Murtaza Ahmed. My partner is Farisha Farouk, who will be joining us for the later half of the presentation. The topic that we chose for our project for CMIS 3350 is Edmonton Bylaw Infractions. That's the data set that we acquired from the City of Edmonton's open data. And we applied different techniques and tried to understand that data a little bit better in order to come up with some recommendations by the end of the presentation. What are bylaw infractions? Infractions simply mean violation of a law of a particular city. Usually infractions involve things that cause public some harm, some danger, or some inconvenience. Bylaw infractions can be different for different cities. Edmonton has a lot of laws and any violation would be essentially infraction, but the data that the city of Edmonton has provided looks at 5 particular infractions that we will go in detail in the next upcoming slides. Where was data acquired from? City of Edmonton's open data portal. There's a link for that. It was an amazing data set. Reason being that it was bigger in length, so a lot of rows, roughly more than 76,000 or so, but very few columns. So a lot of different interpretations could be made based on a lot of data that was available. We added 2 columns to our data set. One was the date, November 26th, that was used as a reference point because this website changes often. So we just picked November 26th data as our reference point, and then we calculated the number of days to if a complaint has been remained unresolved or if it has remained under investigation. City of Edmonton provides the status of the infraction, whether it is under investigation, whether it has been resolved, and all of those complaints that are still under investigation from the date they were started till November 26th. We just calculated the number of days that those complaints have remained unresolved. That is a screenshot of the City of Edmonton's open data portal. It has an excellent resource. As I mentioned earlier, City of Edmonton provided data for 5 particular infractions. They are unwanted weeds on property, graffiti on walls, unlicensed businesses, nuisance on property, and snow or ice on the sidewalk. The first question that we wanted to ask is, in a particular year, which kind of complaint was the highest? So we went on a journey to find out what kind of bylaw infractions are the highest in any given year. We chose a packed bubbles visualization, which made the most sense to understand what kind of infractions are the highest in any given year. There is a very interesting pattern that you will realize by the end of the visualization, that in any given year, snow or ice on the sidewalk, as well as nuisance on property, those seem to be the biggest complaints, followed by unlicensed businesses that comes next. Unwanted weeds and graffiti seem to be the smaller of our problems. Each of the complaint on the City of Edmonton's data is either initiated by a citizen or by a bylaw enforcement officer. The next question we wanted to ask was, what kind of complaint was initiated by whom? The more interesting question that we wanted to answer was, what kind of bylaw infractions or what kind of complaints did the citizens care most about. So we went on another journey to find out that what kind of complaints were made by either the citizens or the bylaw officers. We chose a tree map. Um, there were 5 bylaw infractions that were provided in the data. There are 10 boxes on this tree map. Each box tells us the type of complaint or the type of bylaw infraction and who initiated it more. So we can see that in 2011, citizens initiated the most complaints for unlicensed businesses. We can find a really common pattern going into every year from 2011 up to 2018. We can see that citizens cared a lot about unlicensed businesses, whereas bylaw officers cared much more about snow or ice on the sidewalk. Although citizens also cared about that a lot, as this is usually the third or the fourth biggest box. What is interesting to see is that bylaw officers haven't really initiated any complaints for unlicensed businesses. They are mostly generated by citizens.
Hello everyone, my name is Farisha and I will be explaining the number of unresolved days, which shows us how long in terms of number of days each complaint remained under investigation for. As we scroll through the years, and as was expected, the number of days unresolved gets smaller. However, the important thing to note here is that there are complaints that have been under investigation and are still unresolved since 2011 for over an average of 2,000 days.
Next question that we wanted to answer was, what kind of complaint was the highest in any given month of the year? To answer that, we created a bar chart. We put the number of complaints or infractions on the y-axis, which is count here. We put the months as well as the type of complaint on the x-axis. There are a few patterns on this visualization that you go, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. The snow and wheat complaints seem to be very seasonal. Snow complaints are usually in the winter months, whereas wheat complaints are usually in the summer months. Also interesting to see is that the nuisance on property complaints usually rise during the summer months when there are more parties, there are more barbecues, hence more noise. Another interesting aspect is that the complaints about unlicensed businesses, which we saw that the citizens care a lot about, usually rise during the first 3 months of the year. So we can see January, February, March, usually these complaints are higher than the rest of the year. The next question that we wanted to answer was, which areas of the city receives the most complaints? To answer this question, we used the map visualization. There are a lot of areas that are on the city of Edmonton's data set, but just to have a better idea of where most of the problems are being reported or where most of the complaints are being recorded, we just filtered the top 15. We can apply any filter that we want to understand the data, and the common pattern that we observed is that the central area of Edmonton is where most of the complaints are usually reported, as well as this southern region. So Alberta Avenue usually tends to be one of the top ones, closely followed by Macaulay, also the central area as well as the southern part. In each of the years, you see the trend is pretty similar. Alberta Avenue tends to be one of the largest areas for complaints reported, as well as Macaulay. Now that we know which areas in Edmonton receive the most complaints, we wanted to dig a little bit deeper. We chose the top 8 areas in Edmonton based on the number of complaints, and we wanted to find some unusual or interesting facts about the complaints and how the complaints in those areas compare to the rest of the city. We used a box and whiskers plot. We put the neighborhoods on the x-axis and we put the number of complaints on the y-axis. What we realize is that between 2011 to 2018, consistently Alberta Avenue and Macaulay seem to have a distribution of the number of complaints per month that are higher than the average for the rest of the city. Um, Whereas in the last 3 years, it seems like the complaints in Queen Mary Park, Strathcona, and Westmount are decreasing and have been less than the average of the rest of the city, apart from some of the outliers. As far as downtown and Oliver are concerned, they provide more of a mixed bag. Usually they stay around the average, but sometimes they have been below the average as well. So good news is that the three areas of Edmonton, Queen Mary Park, Strathcona, and Westmount are receiving less and less complaints. And since the city is expanding, and these areas provide a lot of affordable housing, so if there are less complaints in these areas, that's overall positive for the city.
Our findings indicate that unlicensed business, snow or ice on walk, and nuisance property were the most complained about. Together with that, it was found that initiators of these complaints were mostly citizens. As we scroll through the years, it is clear that citizens are more proactive in initiating complaints, and that bylaw officers should maybe be more vigilant in doing so as well. As we expected, snow or ice on walk complaints were confirmed to be only recorded during the winter seasons. Weeds or complaints were only found to be initiated during the spring, summer, and fall seasons. It was, as Murtaza indicated, very interesting to note that nuisance property complaints spiked during the warmer weather. Unlicensed business complaints were found to be the most during the first 3 months of the year. It seems that the average time it takes to resolve complaints is approximately the same for all types. However, there are a lot of complaints that remain unresolved for over an average of 2,000 days. Bylaw officers should perhaps look into investigating these as soon as possible and then closing these investigations. The neighborhoods that had the top 8 most complaints were identified to be Alberta Avenue, Central McDougall, Downtown, Macaulay, Oliver, Queen Mary Park, Strathcona, and Westmount, all within central Edmonton. These areas were consistently over the years in the top 8 most complaints list. Perhaps bylaw officers should give more attention in these areas to ensure citizens are not inconvenienced by these infractions. In conclusion, upon analyzing the data, it can be said that most complaints appear to be seasonal. Furthermore, the city officials need to look into the period of time unresolved complaints have been under investigation for and find more efficient ways to resolve these complaints. Finally, since the top 8 neighborhoods were identified to be in central Edmonton, monitoring of these areas needs to be done in order to ensure citizens are not inconvenienced in the future with these types of infractions. We hope you have enjoyed the findings of our report as much as we had in analyzing the data and finding these patterns. Thank you and have a good day.